A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms is the new Game of Thrones spin-off show. Season 1 is based on a book by George R.R. Martin called The Hedge Knight, so this first episode is also titled The Hedge Knight. Hedge Knights are humble travelling knights who work like mercenaries.
It's like a knight, but sadder.
Because this show isn't about lords and kings playing the Game of Thrones, it's more about the common folk, the working people. This show is more small-scale and more light-hearted than Game of Thrones. So episode 1 introduces Dunk, as he becomes Sir Duncan the Tall. Dunk meets his squire, Egg, and they go to a tournament. Dunk meets Fossoways and a Dondarrion, he dances with Lyonel Baratheon, and Dunk has graphic projectile diarrhea. So what is this story? What does it mean? And how does the show compare to the book? This video has no spoilers, except at the very end of the video, after a warning, we will talk spoilers in the spoiler zone. A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms is set 90 years before Game of Thrones, and set 80 years after House of the Dragon. The current king is Daeron Targaryen II, and at this time there are no dragons. Dragons went extinct. There was a civil war 13 years ago called the Blackfire Rebellion, but for now the realm is at peace. Our main character is Dunk. Dunk grew up as an orphan on the streets of King's Landing, until Dunk was taken in by Sir Arlen. Arlen was a hedge knight, a travelling knight who serves wherever he's needed. Hedge knights are often poor. They sometimes literally sleep under hedges. But Arlen taught Dunk the values of a true knight, to be honourable, brave, and loyal, to defend the weak and the innocent. Arlen was like a father to Dunk. Arlen never hit Dunk, except when he deserved it. In one flashback, it looks like Dunk was mud wrestling. In another, it looks like he caused a fire. One time, Dunk was blamed for stealing a pie, but Dunk was innocent. This other kid was the real pie thief. But Dunk loved Arlen. He was the closest thing Dunk ever had to a parent. In the book, Dunk is now 16 or 17 years old. He's a shambling, shaggy, big-boned boy. In the show, Dunk looks older. The actor Peter Claffey was 28 when they filmed this season. In the book, Dunk is almost 7 feet tall, while Peter Claffey says that he's 6'6". So the actor looks a little different to book Dunk, but Claffey captures book Dunk's awkwardness, his honesty, simplicity, and naive charm. For the past few days, Arlen and Dunk were travelling to Ashford. Ashford is a town in the Reach, and House Ashford is a minor house sworn to House Tyrell. Lord Ashford is holding a tournament, or tourney. At tourneys, knights compete at jousting, to win money, win glory, and to have fun. But on the way to Ashford, Arlen got sick and died. So Dunk buries the man who was like his father. In the book, it says the old man's body feels as light as a bag of leaves. Dunk buries Arlen on the west side of a hill, because Arlen loved to watch the sunset. Dunk was Arlen's squire. He looked after Arlen's horses, cleaned Arlen's armour, helped at the camps. Now that Arlen is dead, Dunk needs a new job, so Dunk discusses his employment opportunities with the horses. The dark brown horse is Thunder, the war horse. He's bright of eye and fierce of spirit, veteran of dozens of fights. The light brown horse is Chestnut, the old sway-backed stot. She's kind of useless, but Dunk still loves her. The white horse is Sweetfoot, the palfrey, used for comfortable, easy riding. Dunk could sell the horses, but then what would he do? He could join the City Watch in King's Landing, or in Lannisport, the Lannister city. But Dunk holds Arlen's sword, and he decides to go to the Ashford tourney, to be a knight. The wind blows dramatically, the Game of Thrones theme music builds, and then it cuts to Dunk taking a shit. Dunk shits on the dramatic moment. He shits on our expectations, to show that this show is different to Game of Thrones. This show is not so serious. It's more silly and irreverent and earthy. This story is about deconstructing the romantic image of a fantasy knight. Because Dunk is not some cool guy hero who always looks good and always wins. Being a hedge knight is not sexy. A hedge knight digs graves in the rain, he rides through the mud, he takes a shit by a tree. But even while Dunk defecates, we see a beautiful songbird. There is beauty amidst the ugliness. So the beginning of this show has sunshine and rain, a tree and a grave, life and death. It has heroic fantasy and diarrhea. This story is about the contrast between fantasy and reality. It's also basically the same as the start of Shrek. The movie Shrek also begins with a romantic fairy tale that hard cuts to toilet humor. Shrek wipes his ass with a fairy tale, like how Dunk shits on his dramatic moment. Maybe this whole show is basically just Shrek in Westeros. The horse who plays Chestnut is named Shrek in real life, so coincidence? A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms doesn't have a big opening sequence like Game of Thrones and House of the Dragon. It just has a simple title card. It's in the Game of Thrones font, but in a handwritten style. So compared to the epic, bombastic Game of Thrones, this show is more personal, more intimate, more humble. Dunk rides off to be a Knight of the Seven Kingdoms. But thing is, you can't just decide to be a knight. You have to be knighted in a ceremony by another knight. Dunk later says that Arlen knighted him before Arlen died, but we don't see that. And if Arlen did knight Dunk, why does Dunk even consider selling the horses and joining the City Watch? Maybe Dunk is lying. Maybe Dunk is not a real knight. Dunk rides towards Ashford and he stops at an inn. He leaves his horses with this boy Egg. Egg seems sad and mopey, because Egg wants to be at the tournament having fun, but he's stuck at this boring inn instead. The inn is almost empty because most everyone's gone to the tourney. The innkeep thinks tournaments are pointless, and that knights are just the same as other men. So again, the show questions the glorious image of knights. What is so special about a knight? There's a drunk guy at the inn who suddenly says that he dreamed of Dunk. He pulls a knife and tells Dunk to stay away. The guy is dressed fancy, so he looks like he's some lordling or rich guy, and it's scary for a low-born man like Dunk to be threatened by a powerful nobleman. If you want to know who this drunk guy is, watch the spoiler zone at the end of this video. Dunk is so hungry that for dinner he orders the lamb and the duck.
I think I'll take 2 chickens.
In the book, there's a lavish description of Dunk's dinner, but the show skips the food description. Dunk finds Egg playing with his warhorse, Thunder. Egg is adventurous and cheeky, and Egg makes fun of Dunk. Egg says that Dunk doesn't look like a real knight because Dunk's belt is made of rope. The reason why Dunk wears a rope belt is that Arlen's belt was too small for Dunk, so Dunk had to make his own belt from rope. Egg is desperate to be part of the tournament, so Egg asks to be Dunk's squire. Dunk refuses and says that Egg is better off without Dunk. Dunk knows that it's tough being a squire for a hedge knight, and he thinks Egg will have a better life at this inn. So Dunk is kind and considerate to this boy. Dunk rides to Ashford alone. Ashford is a market town protected by Ashford Castle. Ashford Meadow is now full of tents and stalls from people who've come for the tournament. The book describes dozens of brightly coloured pavilions. Pavilions are big, fancy tents. In the book, the pavilions are like a field of wildflowers in rich reds and sunny yellows, greens, blues, and purples. Author George Martin loves the colour and splendour of medieval pageantry. In this episode, the tents are more drab. We see less of the fancy knights' pavilions and see more of the common folk. There are butchers, florists, grocers, washers, people setting up the jousting lists. The show focuses on average, everyday, working people. We also see some noble knights' pavilions. This is the pavilion of Sir Manfred Dondarrion. He's related to Beric Dondarrion in Game of Thrones. We see the Lion of House Lannister, the family of Tyrion, Cersei, and Jaime. We see the beehives of House Beesbury, the Baratheon Stag, the Hightower of House Hightower. We see the Tyrell Rose. The current Tyrell Lord of Highgarden is Leo Longthorn Tyrell, and these are probably Longthorn's things being set up by a servant here. The heraldry of House Ashford is a white sun and chevron on orange, and their banners are all over Ashford town. A tournament is a big time for marketing. Everyone is showing off. We see Ashford guardsmen annoying a serving woman, as described in the book. Dunk looks at these statues of glorious, victorious knights. He looks up at the banner of the noble House Dondarrion, looks up at the castle of House Ashford. Dunk is just a lowly commoner, but he hopes to use knighthood to move up in the world, to get a better life for himself. At this tournament, Dunk hopes to make money. He could build a reputation. If he's lucky, some lord might give Dunk a job in a castle. Then Dunk could live more comfortably. He could eat better food and get better pay. Game of Thrones and House of the Dragon are about winning the throne and saving the world. But a Knight of the Seven Kingdoms is just about an average guy who wants to earn a living and get a less shitty job. Plummer is the steward in charge of the tournament. He questions whether Dunk is really a knight. Dunk says that Arlen knighted him while a robin watched, but this robin only watched Dunk poop. And this flashback suggests that Arlen didn't plan to knight Dunk. So it seems like Dunk is lying, that he's not a knight. And as Plummer says, it is a serious crime in this world to fake a sacred oath. It's interesting, because Dunk is usually a very honest, straightforward guy. It would be surprisingly out of character for Dunk to lie about being a knight. Dunk shows Arlen's sword, which has a penny in the hilt, because Arlen comes from a village called Pennytree in the Riverlands. Pennytree has a tradition of nailing pennies to an oak tree. The books tease the mystery of how this tradition started. In the book, Arlen's sword doesn't have a penny in the hilt, so that detail is invented for the show. Plummer says that Lord Ashford wants a fancy, classy tournament with only fancy, classy knights. He doesn't want some stinky hedge knight with a rope belt at his fancy tourney.
Call us lower class. He called us lower class?
So Dunk almost leaves defeated, but then Plummer sees Arlen's old shield. The heraldry on Arlen's shield is a winged chalice. In the book, Arlen said that the cup was full of faith and fellowship and good things to drink. The sight of this battered old shield makes Plummer feel bad for Dunk. So Plummer says that Dunk can join the tournament if another knight vouches for Dunk. So like if a knight says that yes, he knows Dunk and Dunk is trustworthy, then Plummer will believe that Dunk is a legit knight. So Dunk says that he'll ask Sir Manfred Dondarrion to vouch for him. Because a few years ago, Arlen and Dunk served the Dondarrions in a war. Dunk hopes that Manfred will remember Arlen and Dunk and will vouch for Dunk so that Dunk can join the tourney. Plummer also says that in this tourney, if you win a joust, you get the loser's horse and armor and weapons, and the loser has to buy their stuff back. So if you win a joust, you make money, and if you lose a joust, you lose money. Dunk doesn't have enough money to buy his stuff back, so if he loses his first joust, he'll lose his horse and armor and weapons, and he won't be able to be a knight anymore. Dunk is risking everything on his first joust. Dunk looks for Manfred, but Manfred is asleep. Manfred has been having sex with these two sex workers, Red and Beony. Red and Beony are not in the book. This is the first scene that is invented for the show. The book only mentions that Dunk notices a pretty red-haired whore. Maybe that's what inspired Red and Beony. Red and Beony say that Sir Manfred often has sex with other people's wives, so even though Manfred is a proper knight from a noble family, he's not a good person. Some knights aren't honourable. Beony says that she'll wake Manfred if Dunk pays her a stag. In Westeros, stags are silver coins. They have the stag of House Baratheon on them, probably because Aegon the Conqueror was close with Orys Baratheon. Gold coins are called dragons, because they have the Targaryen dragon on them, and coppers are stars, because they have the star of the Faith of the Seven religion. So that's the currency in Westeros: golden dragons, silver stags, and copper pennies. Dunk doesn't have a stag, so Beony and Red tease Dunk for being a poor, homeless, sad hedge knight. They call Dunk it instead of him, which is so mean. Dunk is completely flustered and lost for words. In the books, Dunk thinks he's no good with words, and worse with women. Dunk feels nervous around women. In the book, Dunk is just a teenager, and he's a virgin. He's still finding his confidence with people. Dunk talks to his horses. He says that Arlen said that a hedge knight is the truest kind of knight, because most knights are sworn to obey one particular lord or house, but hedge knights have the freedom to choose who they serve. Hedge knights can fight for a cause that they believe in. So even though hedge knights are poor and lower class, hedge knights are more able to follow the moral values of a true knight, to fight for justice and to protect the innocent. One of the themes of this story is that true heroism doesn't come from fancy rich people, like Sir Manfred. Heroism comes from humble, honest, everyday people, like Dunk. Dunk is like Red and Beony, in that Dunk is working class. If he wants to eat, he's got to earn money. At the same time, Dunk also wants to be a true knight, to be chivalrous and honourable. Did Sellwood of the Mirror Shield ever have to worry about paying rent? This show is about the clash between idealism and reality. Dunk meets Sir Stephen Fossoway and his cousin and squire, Raymond Fossoway. House Fossoway is from Cider Hall in the Reach. The Fossoway sigil is an apple, so the Fossoways make lots of apple puns.
I may not be right, but my cousin's rotten to the core.
Sir Stephen is rude and mean. Stephen deliberately injures other knights in training, so Stephen has an advantage in the tournament. So, like Manfred, Stephen seems a shitty, dishonourable knight, while his cousin Raymond seems more friendly. Dunk makes a weird comment saying that his sword is his by right. Dunk is acting defensive, like he's an imposter. Maybe he feels guilty for lying about being a knight. Plummer said Dunk stinks, so Dunk goes and bathes in a river.
Any excuse for them to see me in my jocks?
In the book, Arlen made Dunk have a bath every month, which Dunk thought was far too often. Dunk goes back to Manfred's tent, but Red says that Manfred is still asleep. We see Red giving pants to a pantsless man. The books say that at tourneys and army camps, there are often women who wash and repair clothes. Sometimes these washerwomen also do sex work. Red and Beony are with a third woman named Daisy. We saw her enjoying some chicken earlier. And Daisy is dressed like a corpse, with a funeral shroud and with stones painted with eyes. We first saw this death rite back in the very first episode of Game of Thrones. It seems that Daisy is dressing like a corpse as part of a sex thing, like Manfred or someone wants to roleplay having sex with a dead woman. We've seen before in Game of Thrones that some men like strange roleplay, and there are multiple mentions of sex with dead people.
With a taste for fresh cadavers.
In the books, the legendary Night's King has sex with a corpse queen. In George Martin's book Meathouse Man, a man has sex with a corpse in a brothel. Why does George Martin keep writing about having sex with corpses? Maybe don't think about it. Red tells Dunk that being a knight is like being a sex worker. Knights and whores put their bodies at risk for others' entertainment. Red warns that you only get one body in your life, so you should be careful how you use it. So this scene is about facing death. Being a knight isn't just about swinging a sword and looking cool. Knighthood is dangerous. People die at tournaments all the time. In Game of Thrones Season 1, we saw Hugh of the Vale die in a joust. As Plummer pointed out, tourneys are especially dangerous for unskilled, untrained knights. And Dunk is not very skilled or trained. Red, Beony, and Daisy are kind of like the three witches or three fates of folklore. They warn Dunk of future dangers, and they confront Dunk with the very real possibility of death. Dunk sees a puppet show narrated by Tanselle. Like Dunk, Tanselle is young and very tall, and she seems nervous performing, yet brave. Dunk gets a crush on her right away. Tanselle's puppet group is from Dawn, and in the book they have small puppets, but here they have a big dragon puppet, rigged to breathe fire. Now that dragons are extinct in Westeros, all that's left of them are puppets, and stories, and bones. The puppeteers tell the story of Sellwood of the Mirror Shield, a hero of ancient legend. Sellwood wanted to kill a dragon named Urax, so Sellwood polished his shield until it reflected like a mirror. So when Sellwood approached the dragon, hiding behind his mirror shield, Urax only saw its own reflection and didn't attack until Sellwood got close enough to slay the dragon. Tanselle describes Selwood as a boy from nothing risking it all. She calls him brave and ambitious, calls him stupid and humble. And that description also fits Dunk. Dunk is also a boy from nothing risking all. He's also brave, ambitious, stupid, and humble. He's also in disguise, in the sense that Dunk might be lying about being a knight. So, will Dunk become a great hero like Selwood? Did Selwood even ever exist? Can dreams and fairy tales come true, or is reality more messy and complex? Raymond Fossoways calls Dunk half-man, meaning Dunk is so tall that he must be half-giant. This is a cute callback to Game of Thrones, where Tyrion is called half-man for the opposite reason, because Tyrion is short.
What you looking at, half-man?
Raymond takes Dunk to the pavilion of Lyonel Baratheon. The Baratheon sigil is a stag, so Lyonel's tent is decorated with antlers. Lyonel is a knight of House Baratheon. House Baratheon is the family of Robert, Stannis, and Renly Baratheon. In the books, Lyonel is one of the best fighters in Westeros.
Lyonel Baratheon, black affair.
Lyonel is very tall, a swaggering giant, almost as tall as Dunk, who is almost 7 feet tall. Lyonel's actor Daniel Ings is not quite that tall, and the show cheekily acknowledges this when Dunk says, "I thought he'd be bigger." Lyonel wears an enormous antlered headpiece that looks almost like a crown. 80 years from now, Lyonel's descendant, Robert Baratheon, will defeat the Targaryens and become king. Lyonel hosts a great party, and Lyonel gives a rambling speech about the history of jousting. He says jousting is so fun that it could not have been invented by man. He seems to be implying that jousting was invented by stags, because in nature, male deer ram each other with their antlers, just like jousting, and stags are Lyonel's heraldry. No one's quite sure what Lyonel is talking about, but everyone's excited for the jousting. According to the books, the tradition of knighthood was brought to Westeros by the Andals, a people who came from the east. It's said that the first knights and the first tournaments in Westeros happened here in the Reach, where Ashford is. To this day, the Reach is the home of knighthood, of chivalry and tournaments. So this is like playing football in England. This is the home of the sport, and everyone's excited for the jousting. Lyonel sees Dunk from across the bar and really digs his vibe. Lyonel makes weird comments and threats to fuck with Dunk, but Dunk is so honest and naive, so charmingly thick and gormless that he's just impossible to bully. Dunk says that the reason why he slouches is because Dunk grew up on the streets. It was dangerous in the slums of Flea Bottom, so Dunk tends to hide himself, be defensive. Lyonel says the gods made Dunk tall, so he should be tall. He should be proud, take up space. It's like how Olenna tells Daenerys to be a dragon. It's like how Tyrion tells Jon Snow to use his bastard identity like armor. These books are very much about identity, and this episode is about Dunk creating his identity as Sir Duncan the Tall. Dunk and Lyonel dance. It's a wild, kooky dance where Lyonel and Dunk playfully stomp on each other's feet. In House of the Dragon, Laenor says that dancing is like combat, and this dance is a bit violent, it is a bit horny, it's life and it's death, and it's fun, like the tournament itself. Lyonel flirts with Dunk. Lyonel talks about gay fun. So there's sexual tension here, but Dunk doesn't seem to notice. There's a similar bit in the books, where a man hits on Dunk and Dunk doesn't notice. Lyonel says that he once bravely sailed into a storm. The Stormlands are famous for their storms. The Baratheon castle is called Storm's End, and it's said the castle was built by Durin the Defiant to endure the assaults of the Storm King. Lyonel says that all Stormlanders must face a storm. In the books, Robert, Stannis, and Renly's father, Steffon Baratheon, died in a shipwreck in a storm. Earlier, Plummer talked about the Reach, and implied that Reachmen are better than Riverlanders, and now Lyonel is talking about Stormlanders. This episode highlights the different cultures of the different kingdoms or regions of Westeros. Dunk is anxious. He worries that he's not skilled enough to win at the tournament against trained, noble knights. And Lyonel says he's right. Dunk probably will fail. Dunk says that losing would be a disaster for him because Dunk can't afford to buy back his horse, while Lyonel is rich, so if he loses, he can easily buy his own stuff back. Dunk highlights the unfairness of the inequality between rich and poor, between the nobles and the small folk in this world. Dunk finally meets Sir Manfred Dondarrion. Manfred is going to bed with Red and with another woman named Leah the Lovely. A few years ago, Manfred and his Lord Father fought a war against the Vulture King in Dawn. Dawn is the southern Mediterranean-ish region ruled by the Martells. Dawn only unified with Westeros 22 years ago, so there are still some tensions between the Dornish and the rest of Westeros. Arlen and Dunk served in the Dondarrion army in this war. Arlen was wounded in battle for the Dondarrions, but Manfred doesn't care. He doesn't remember all the men who died for his family. In this unfair world, poor men die for rich men, and the rich don't even care. Manfred refuses to vouch for Dunk, so it looks like Dunk is screwed. If he can't find another knight to vouch for him, Dunk can't compete in the tournament. Red gives Dunk a sympathetic glance as she goes to do her duty to the Dondarrions. Back at camp, Dunk finds Egg. Egg got here from the inn himself, and Egg did all the work of setting up Dunk's camp, so Egg hopes that Dunk will just have to accept Egg as squire. Egg asks Dunk's name. Everyone's been telling Dunk that he needs a better name than Dunk, so Egg suggests that Dunk is short for Duncan, and Lyonel told Dunk to be tall, so Dunk decides on the spot that his name is Sir Duncan the Tall. Dunk sounded ridiculous, but Sir Duncan the Tall sounds like a hero's name. Dunk agrees for Egg to be his squire, though Dunk warns that the life of a hedge knight is tough. The food is plain, they have no tent. Dunk says he'll beat Egg if Egg deserves it, but Dunk is honest and fair and humble. He says that he's not a lord, he's only a hedge knight. This humility makes Sir Duncan different to arseholes like Sir Manfred and Sir Stefan. Dunk is more respectful, more caring, more honourable. He wants to do the right thing, like Arlen taught him. Dunk is a true knight. Except that Dunk is maybe lying, that Arlen didn't knight Dunk, so Dunk isn't a knight at all. That lie is the paradox of Sir Duncan the Tall. He's a true knight who isn't a knight, like Brienne in Game of Thrones. Dunk and Egg see a shooting star. Heavenly lights can mean good luck, or they can be omens of doom, like the red comet in Game of Thrones. Since the fancy noble knights are sleeping in silk tents, they don't see this shooting star. It's only Dunk, the humble hedge knight under a tree, who gets the good luck. So again, it's his humility as a hedge knight that makes Dunk special. Overall, this episode is pretty faithful to the book. Almost all the scenes in this episode are in the book, and a lot of the dialogue is taken straight from the book, word for word. This episode does add some scenes, like Red and Beony and Daisy are not in the book. The scenes with Lyonel in this episode are not in the book. The scenes with Plummer are expanded to make Plummer more funny. The scene with Manfred is expanded. The flashbacks are added. But the scenes with Dunk and Egg are mostly straight from the book. Overall, it's a faithful adaptation of the book, just with extra scenes to expand the world, deepen the themes, and to give the side characters more personality. There's still more to discuss about this episode. So my rotten wormy cousin, AltSwiftX, made a 3-hour-long video about this episode of A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms. It's a series with Glidus called Dunk Time. Every week, Glidus and Swift release a lengthy conversation discussing each episode of the show. They go over every scene in what could be called excessive detail, and they get opinionated, even silly. You can listen to Dunk Time right after A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms airs, each Sunday night on Nebula. Nebula has Dunk Time early and full length all season. Nebula also has the full-length Dragon Time videos discussing every episode of House of the Dragon, and you can watch The Fake Jon Snow, a 22-hour-long video about Jon Snow. You can listen to all of these on podcast apps using the Nebula podcast feed. There's also an exclusive AltShiftX video about Ivanhoe, the movie that inspired Dunk and Egg. This is over 60 hours of exclusive Alt and Glidus videos on Nebula. Nebula is an independent, creator-owned site, and signing up helps support Alt-Shift-X. This month, you can get 50% off an annual subscription with my link. So, if you are a true knight, sign up at nebula.tv/Alt-Shift-X. Or if you're a rotten, wormy apple, sign up at nebula.tv/Alt-Shift-X. Links are below. Thank you, and enjoy dunk time. Okay, now let's talk spoilers. Spoiler warning for all Game of Thrones shows and books. So the big spoiler here is that Egg is not a random commoner. Egg is actually a Targaryen prince. His real name is Aegon Targaryen. Egg is the son of Prince Maekar Targaryen, and Egg is the brother of Maester Aemon from Game of Thrones.
Egg.
Egg is the great-grandfather of Daenerys Targaryen from Game of Thrones, and is the great-great-grandfather of Jon Snow. The Game of Thrones TV show does remove a generation, technically, so the family tree is different, but don't worry about it. This drunk guy at the inn is Egg's brother, Prince Daeron Targaryen. He's called the Drunken, because he's an alcoholic. Daeron was meant to compete in the tournament with Egg as his squire, but Daeron didn't want to compete, so he took Egg to this inn to hide, and he shaved off Egg's hair to hide his Targaryen identity. Dunk and Egg have many adventures together, as described in the Dunk and Egg books, and many years later, Egg becomes King of Westeros, and Dunk leads King Egg's Kingsguard. Dunk fights a trial by combat against Lyonel Baratheon and wins. The books don't explicitly say whether Dunk was ever really knighted, but it is repeatedly implied that Dunk is lying, and that he's technically not a real knight. King Egg is a good ruler until he and Dunk die at the mysterious tragedy of Summerhall. If you want to know the full story of Dunk and Egg in the books, watch our videos about Dunk and Egg linked below. We're making videos about A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms every week. We're also doing live streams at about 10:45 p.m. Eastern Time Sundays, right after each episode comes out. You can also listen to Dunk Time on Nebula right after each episode airs. Signing up to Nebula helps support Alt-Shift-X. Thanks also to the patrons, including Rayleigh, Kennard, Tamsin Harrison, Juan Pablo Aguilar, Arjun Paudel, Iris Barbosa, Larry Minovich, and Cheyenne. Cheers.